all of you who came out this evening. As you probably have noticed, Jeff is running late. Actually, he's running very late. He's not here tonight. Jeff is suffering a double whammy, I think, from the results of a Saturn transit. And Jeff has some back problems that he's suffering with, and also some pneumonia going on. So we can send him a bit of healing power and love, and on occasion over the past 7 or 8 years, as long as we've been doing this, Jeff and I each have done it solo, and so tonight you get Rick Levine uncensored by... Yeah. He keeps me... Whoop. Something happened. There was a mic issue. All right. Welcome to... Are we having mic weirdness? Thank you, Aaron, for that wonderful introduction. Whatever you said, I wasn't listening. And thank you, Soul Food, and thank you, Craig, for videoing tonight. Yeah, you can. There's Craig. And welcome to Soul Food Coffee House in Redmond, Washington, for Astrology Night, the first Astrology Night of 2015. We have a new year. Which astrologically isn't a big deal, but we humans really like to mark things, and we do that by counting years and using calendars and stuff like that. As you may have noticed, I am Jeff-less tonight. Jeff is under the medical weather right now, and hopefully he will be back in operation soon. And those of you out on internet land, you can send Jeff your healing light and love, and Jeff, get well. We miss you. I miss you already. So, the holiday season is over. Now, how many of you were here last month in December? A handful of you? All right. Now, how many of you had a holiday that in some way was a bit more intense, crazy, shall we say hellish? Don't have to, because it's not all bad, but this holiday season was marked by the presence of the Uranus-Pluto square being activated once again. For those of you who are regulars here, you know that Uranus is an 84-year cycle, and it's the planet of shock and awakening and lightning and surprise and awakening. And through this holiday season, it was activating Pluto, which is the planet of deep psychological transformational change. Pluto, the lord of the underworld, the energy comes up from the unconscious, from the depths. This Uranus-Pluto square has been playing in and out of exact focus since 2012, and its seventh and final exact culmination will be this March. But it still is the predominant energy of the past several years, and even though it will begin to fade in March, in April, May, June, it'll still be with us, and we'll still be feeling the ramifications for years to come. So from that standpoint, this holiday season, as the sun was lining up with Pluto and squaring Uranus, it should have been intense. Stuff coming up, maybe more family issues, maybe more issues that had to do with, with survival of the holidays than normal. And the holidays typically brings that kind of stuff out, but it was even perhaps more so this year. Now, our purpose now is not to spend the evening in retrospective, but I wanted to make sure we knew where we were coming from, because things are really changing now. And even though we have a final redux of the Uranus-Pluto square in March of this year, and the energy still plays in and out for the next, for the next couple of months, every 7 days as the moon hits a cardinal sign, and as it hits Aries, it lines up with Uranus and squares Pluto. As it hits Cancer a week later, it opposes Pluto and squares Uranus. And a week later, it does the same thing again every 7 days. We get like a remembrance of these times are really intense times. However, 2015 may be, as we look back on it from 2016, 2015 may just be a kinder, gentler year. And our goal today is not to look ahead at 2015 in a global perspective, but it is to look ahead to the month of January. And in January, we have some important shifts going on. Pluto, which has been for several years and will be for another decade in the sign of Capricorn, because Pluto spends 15 to 30 years in a sign, depending upon how fast it's moving, depending upon where it is in its orbital cycle. So we're in the time of year of Capricorn. Any Capricorns here? What? Does anyone know any good Capricorn jokes? They'll never hear it. So these two Capricorns walked into... Go ahead, what? All right, so as you know, I think that this is statistically really improbable to have this many people in a room without a representative of a particular sign. I'm not sure what the mathematics there are. However, we are in the time of year when, from Earth's point of view, the sun looks like it's in the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn is the mountain goat. In fact, Capricorn is the mountain goat that's the mammal that climbs to the highest altitudes on the planet. And it's also the sea goat we call the dolphin, which is the mammal that lives at the lowest depths on the planet. And you see, Capricorn likes hierarchy. Capricorn is an ambitious sign. And this time of year, we kind of, even if we say we're not going to celebrate the holidays this year, we're not going to do new... As the holidays get closer, and as the sun moves into Capricorn on the winter solstice, back around December 21st, somehow we all lock into step, because Capricorn has this kind of organization or structure to it. And this time of year, we kind of have to get serious. We kind of have to make plans. We make resolutions. These are all kind of Capricorn events. Now, because Pluto is spending a decade and a half in the sign of Capricorn, the sun, as it moves through Capricorn, lines up with Pluto. And in fact, the sun exactly lined up with Pluto on January 3rd, a couple of days after the beginning of the new year. But this is about intense death and rebirth. And when I say death here, I do not mean physical death. I mean the death and rebirth that happens every time we have to let a good idea go. Every time we change plans. Every time we experience some sort of change, there's a bit of a metaphorical death. And Pluto is actually represented by the phoenix, which is a mythological bird that has magical healing properties. And the phoenix arises, it's born out of the ashes of the ruins of destruction. Operative words here: ashes, ruins, destruction. What happens when the sun lines up with Pluto, as it's still really doing right now? I mean, because this is a once-a-year, event, and it lasts for a few days. It was exact a few days ago. But this is about letting go of the past. It's about doing our internal process, dredging up our hidden thoughts, feelings, memories, passions, bringing them to the light. You see, because when you shine the light of awareness on the hidden, on hidden feelings, on hidden issues, they're never as bad. Okay, occasionally they are. They're never as bad when they're in awareness as when they're hidden and when we're worrying about them. So this is part of the beginning of this year, and part of this January is this process of shining the light of awareness into the darkness so that we can move the energy up. Of course, as the sun was a few days ago, lining up with Pluto, it was also 90 degrees to Uranus, because remember, we have been experiencing this Uranus-Pluto square, which many of you who have been attending astrology nights for a while know that the Uranus-Pluto cycle was lined up in 1965 and 66, creating the artifact of what we refer to as the 60s. And in fact, now as Uranus and Pluto square, the issues of the 60s for the last few years and the next few years are back on us again. They've never gone away completely, but issues of civil rights, 60s, now. Gender issues, the feminist revolution and the rise of modern feminism in the 60s, and now we have gay rights and gender legalization of gender-free relationships, et cetera, et cetera. We have ecology issues that came about in the 60s that now we're dealing with global warming, et cetera, and certainly other things. I'm just skimming across the top. We had people's revolutions in the 60s, largely student revolutions, but now we're having them in the streets of countries all over the world, from Spain to Indonesia to all through the Middle East, even in the United States, the Occupy, everything. And drugs. In the 60s, these issues all came to the surface, and now we're seeing massive legalization that looks like it's a very large wave. Go Washington. That would be our Washington, not their Washington. But the point is that there's a familiarity to many of these issues. Can you see how they're resonant? And they're really kind of creating the undertone of what's going on for us at this time. Now, having said all that, I think that over the weeks ahead that we may actually see the energies easing off of some of these issues. They're not going to go away. But we just had a very powerful full moon, if I can make that happen here. There we go. We just had on January 4th, we had a very powerful full moon, and this full moon on the 4th was lined up opposite the Sun and Pluto and squaring Uranus, again setting the tone for this month. But, as I sometimes say to clients, the most important events sometimes are the ones that happened yesterday. And I'm not saying that January is a non-event. We got lots of stuff cooking in January. But it may be that a lot of January is still about processing what went on in December and at the very beginning of this month, both globally and individually. So, we have, often what happens is that we know the time of year based upon the sign. This is the time of year of Capricorn because the sun is in the sign of Capricorn every year from about December 20th, 21st through about January 20th. And so we are in a Capricorn time of year. But often Mercury, Venus, and Mars often cluster around the sun from the Earth's point of view. In other words, here we are on Earth. These planets are going around the sun, so they don't get very far away from the sun. So often what happens is that the little planets are either ahead or behind of the sun in their movement. And over the last, few days, even over the last weeks, we had Mars moving ahead of the sun into Aquarius. Then just a couple days ago, actually on the 3rd, on the 4th, on the 3rd, we had Venus slip into Aquarius. That's the next sign after Capricorn. Then on the 4th, we had Mercury moving from Capricorn into Aquarius. Can you see that? And then on January 20th, we have the sun kind of as the final statement, setting the tone, but it moves from Capricorn into Aquarius. So what that suggests is that even though we're still, kind of entrenched in this practical, kind of hard-working, serious sign of Capricorn, where the sun is until the 20th of the month, we already have antennas up. Mars, the planet of action, has already moved into Aquarius. And Venus, the planet of what we like, is ahead of the game, also in Aquarius. Mercury, the planet of communication, of how we send and receive information, how we think and how we talk, is already in Aquarius. What does this mean? It means that we're looking toward the future in a way that's even more than we might at this time of year, the beginning of the year, when we do look at the future. And so there's a sense of these planets clustered in Aquarius. They're signaling that there's some sort of change. Maybe it might be a feeling of hope, a feeling of optimism, a feeling that in some ways we're through the worst of it, whatever that means. And I still think that we have some serious processing to do, and I'm not sure that on a social level, I'm not sure that we are through the worst of it, but I think now, through this month, we actually do get to integrate some of that energy and begin to look ahead. You see, Aquarius is an air sign. Aquarius is... any Aquarians here before I begin insulting all of you? Oh, good. All right. Are there any Aquarians who don't think they're weird? I once remember seeing Terence McKenna. Do you know Terence McKenna? Who once said, actually I think he used to say this often, and he had kind of this funny, weird, nasally way of talking, and Terence said, "People say I'm really weird. It's taken me a lot of hard work to get this weird." I have no idea what sign he is. I think he's a Pisces. It doesn't matter. That's Aquarius speaking. Because Aquarius is the weird sign of the zodiac. It's weird because it doesn't fit. It's the most social sign that hates people. All right, it doesn't hate people. Jeff says Aquarius. See, Jeff isn't here, so I have to quote him. Jeff says Aquarius loves humanity. It's the people that they have trouble with. There's this idea of Aquarius. It's conceptual. It's an air sign. Okay, here's the weird thing. Aquarius is the water bearer. You know, the picture of Aquarius is the man with the big pitcher pouring the water. It's not a water sign. It's an air sign, but it's pouring the water. What the hell is that about? I know. And soon you will too. The deal is this. Air has moisture in it. Moisture is required to conduct electricity. Aquarius is the sign of the nervous system. In the body, the dielectric sodium-potassium kind of process that is what occurs, this ion transfer, which is how electric impulses travel through our nerves. It only works if there's moisture present. A battery works, as a matter of fact, when dry cells were created, that was a breakthrough because electricity required moisture to store the energy. In fact, on a very dry day, the energy doesn't flow. Anyone here who's ever lived in the Midwest or in landlocked territory where when it gets very cold, the moisture gets locked up and you touch things or people, or you go to shake hands, and every time you touch something, you spark. It's because the energy doesn't flow naturally. When there's moisture in the air, the energy flows. In the tropics, people just report higher levels of psychic intuitiveness. It's just the energy flows. So Aquarius is an air sign. Air in astrology is about mental. It's about thought. It's about intellect. Aquarius is the most conceptual, the most depersonalized, maybe that's not quite the right word, the most impersonalized air sign. Meaning that in Gemini, the air sign, it's about chitter-chatter, it's about communication, it's about give and take, it's about exchange. In Libra, the air sign, Libra, is more about the relationship between the inner and the outer, the balance of communication between people. In Aquarius, the air is about ideas that are conceptual. So, for example, the sign opposite to Aquarius is Leo, which is often considered to be the sign of heart, of love. Leo is I love you. Aquarius doesn't want to have any of that personalized crap. It wants L-O-V-E. Love. Do you see the difference? They're both love. But in Aquarius, it's to the idea, it's the concept. It doesn't like the wet, sticky, emotional. In astrology, water is emotions. And Aquarius is air. It's dry. So Aquarius in itself has this odd detachment from the thing that it's giving. And so Aquarius is arguably the weirdest sign in the zodiac. I had a friend who's now passed on, who was an Aquarius, who was an ordained Nazareth minister who practiced astrology, but he practiced a particular type of astrology that he used on his llama ranch to sex-type llamas, so that depending upon when you inseminated them, astrologically you could determine whether you would get a male or a female. And he had a big business where he consulted with other llama breeders in doing this, but if that wasn't weird enough, he also ran a Montessori school on his bed and breakfast llama ranch, of which he was a licensed Montessori school teacher. Oh, and he owned and flew hot air balloons. That's an Aquarius. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's no... Groucho Marx once said something like, I would never join a club that would be stupid enough to have me as a member. There's this kind of paradox with Aquarius, because they want to be part of the group, but they always want to be marginalized. They want to have room. They're the nonconformists. They're the nonconformists that are the social animals that want to be part of the collective. Anyhow, so this is kind of the statement of this time of year. When I lived in Minnesota, I remember a very cold Aquarius morning that was probably 25 degrees below zero. And it was beautiful. The sun was out, and I walked out, and I saw this pine tree, and it was absolutely beautiful. And I thought, how beautiful is this? Inside this crust of ice, there's a living being. This pine tree is alive. It's green. And wow, I think I'll just kind of knock the ice off and free it so that it can be, not encased in this ice. And I kind of went with my fingers like this to tinkle to knock the ice off. And I swear, rather than hearing a tinkle and the ice falling off, I heard a thud that went 1,000 miles in every direction. Because it was so locked in. And this is the other thing about Aquarius, is it's a fixed sign. There's a rigidity to the ideas, to the concepts, to the relationships that we establish in Aquarius. And so the reason why I'm talking about this Aquarius now is even though normally it wouldn't be until the 21st of the month when the sun moved into the Aquarius, into the next sign, that we would get this buzz, but because we have Mercury, Venus, and Mars already in the sign of Aquarius, we're already getting this buzz now. And in fact, the other thing that's pulling us away from the past is that for the past 2.5 years, Saturn, the heavy planet, Saturn the taskmaster, the tester, Saturn is Satan. It's like you get what you deserve, even if it isn't always bad, like some religions might have us believe. But Saturn, the day before Christmas, actually the day before Christmas Eve, Saturn left Scorpio and moved into Sagittarius. And this is another huge shift of energy that we're really just settling into. And we'll be feeling this energy for the next couple of years. Okay, it goes back, it retrogrades back into Scorpio a little later this spring, and it stays there for some of the summer. And we'll talk about that more specifically. But Sagittarius is the sign of vision ahead. Sagittarius, like Aquarius, is far-seeing. It's futuristic. It looks at possibilities rather than seeing things negatively and through fear. And so we have Saturn just having moved into Sagittarius, and we have Mercury and Venus just these past couple of days having moved into Aquarius. And you see that fat, thick blue line connecting them. That's a sextile, which is the geometry that describes planets that cooperate and get along. It's 1/6 of a circle. If you think of like a Star of David, the six-pointed star, there's an energy that is stable there. And we have Mercury and Venus now forming sextiles. And this would be yesterday and the day before. But even now, even though it's waning, this is that feeling of stability that we might finally be getting after such a difficult period of time that perhaps we've all, or at least many of us, have been through. So, moving along, the first thing of serious note that happens is that on the 12th, Mars changes signs and escapes from Aquarius, and it moves into Pisces. Now, this becomes an important event, not just because Mars spends about 10 weeks in each sign, and so when it changes signs, Mars is our physical energy. In Aquarius, we're rattled a bit. We're high stress. We're thinking of the future. We're kind of, hot, cold, but awake and aware. And as Mars on the 12th moves into Pisces, Pisces is more watery, it's more emotional, but it's spiritual. And here's where it gets interesting, and this defines a lot of this month, because by the 19th, Mars catches up with Neptune. Can you see them getting closer and closer together? That would be right here. See that? So Neptune is a slow-moving planet that spends 14 years in a sign. Neptune is our dreams, it's imagination. Neptune is the god of the seas, and it's the seas of consciousness. Neptune is everything that's meta to physical, that's in our dreams, that's in our fantasies. And so Neptune is at home now, and will be for the next 10 years or so, in its home sign of Pisces. And now we have Mars making a quick run, Mars heating up the waters. Mars, the god of war. Technical, hold on. Now we have Mars, the god of war, the angry red planet, the Mars, the fiery energy. Mars is hot. And so as Mars moves into the Piscean fishy realms, it heats that water up. So it might heat up our imagination and heat up our dreams. And that's cool. Well, that's hot. Whatever. But what's fascinating is that as Mars moves into Pisces, on the 12th, it immediately comes within range of Neptune, which is camped out in Pisces for a decade and a half. And so what that means is that hot, directional, let's go get it Mars, assertive, aggressive Mars, runs into Neptune, and Neptune's going, oh, wow. I mean, Neptune is the planet of illusion. It's the planet of alcohol, because alcohol kind of fuzzes out reality. Neptune fuzzes out reality. It's spirituality, too. But even the highest forms of spirituality still fuzz out reality. So as Mars moves towards its alignment, which it does every other year or so, as Mars moves towards its alignment with Neptune, there's this sense of the dreams are going to become more important, more real, but we can make dumb decisions unless we're paying attention, because we can be deluded by our sense of where we're going. We can see the world through rose-colored glasses, and that's fine as long as you're not driving a car fast, which is what Mars wants to do. Mars likes going fast. And so we have this kind of dance that kind of, again, this is another piece of the changing energy, that through this month that we become more in touch with our spirituality, more in touch with our dreams, more in touch with the part of us that wants to believe someone else is good, is kind. In other words, we can set ourselves up for disappointment, for discouragement, for disillusionment, because that Mars is energizing. It's energizing the realms of the Pisces dream. So even though this is only a week or so long, and it comes to fruition around the 18th, it's part of a larger scenario, because both Venus and Mercury, and then eventually the Sun, will all move through that same area over the next weeks and months, one at a time, and line up with Neptune. So we're getting a flavor of what's to come. Now, the other hugely significant thing for this month is something that many people know a little about, many people know the wrong things about, and that is Mercury turns retrograde. Now, this is where you're supposed to go, oh. Okay, Mercury turns retrograde. God, what a sad group you are. I don't really mean that. You're a lovely and wonderful group. All right. Mercury turns retrograde. What does that mean? Planets don't go backwards. What happens is they look like they go backwards from Earth's point of view. I'm sure we've all had that experience of sitting in a car and all of a sudden feeling like you're rolling backwards because the car in front of you, or you feel like you're taking your foot off the brake and you're rolling forward, but the car next to you has just, kind of moved backwards, or it looks like they're going backwards because you've rolled forward. It's that optical illusion of something against something else. In fact, the best way to think of this is if you're in a train, and you've probably had this experience if anybody spent time in cities on a subway or on trains where they go, next to each other. If you're in a train going faster than the one next to you on the track next to you, you look out that window and you're sure the train next to you is going backwards. But you're just going forward faster than it is. So Mercury goes around the sun. Here we are on Earth. Mercury goes around the sun. When Mercury comes between the Earth and the sun 3 times a year, it comes close enough to Earth that it's the train on the track next to us that looks like it's going backwards, because we're going forward faster. And so when Mercury looks like it's going backwards, it actually traces in the sky against the stars a backward path. That's why we call it retrograde. Now, historically in astrology, whether it's in the Eastern Vedic Hindu tradition or whether it's in the Greek tradition in the West, retrogrades do not get the nicest words around them, because they create times of difficulty or problem or or awkwardness, or things happen that are not normal. But they're not bad. And this is the problem. Many people have like expectations around Mercury retrograde. But it's like a pendulum. It just doesn't one day look like it turns the other way. It has to slow down. And then it looks like it stops. And then it reverses directions for 3 weeks. And then it slows down, reversing, stops. And then it takes time, picks back up, goes back through its own territory again, and then moves on. So, what we have, if we look here at Mercury, Mercury can move as fast as 2 degrees every day. I'm going to run this backwards just a week or so you can kind of see I'm going to speed this up a little bit too. All right, so I want you to watch this planet right here. That would be Mercury. Are you with me? All right, so I'm running Mercury back. There it is. There's Mercury in Capricorn, and you can see Mercury right there moving from Capricorn to Aquarius. It's at 1 degree, 2 degrees, 4, 5. Now, it looks like it's going to catch up with Venus because Mercury moves faster than Venus, but it begins to slow down, and it's not moving backwards yet, but it's slowing down now. Here's 2 days in a row. It's the same degree. And now, here, it begins to start moving backwards, 16, 15, 12, 8. So you see how Mercury actually has this backward-forward motion? So Mercury turns retrograde on the 21st of January in Aquarius, and it backs up by February 11th. It backs all the way up to 1 degree of Aquarius before it turns direct again, and then it starts moving through Aquarius again. So, what does this mean for us? When Mercury turns retrograde, it often does push us through spaces that it feels like we've been through already. And here's another piece of what's going on now. We have all these planets that are moved into Aquarius. We have Saturn and Sagittarius. We're getting a vision of what's to come. We're seeing that there's a future. We're kind of excited about it. And then Mercury starts slowing down, and we can't quite get. And we begin backing away from it. Yikes. This can be really frustrating if we think that we're going to finish what we started last week. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that no one, there's two negatives. I'm not saying that you can't finish something that you start. But what happens when Mercury turns retrograde is often we're given more time when we didn't think we needed it. That's the positive way of saying it. It can be really frustrating if we think that we have to complete things and tie up loose ends. And it's really good between now and January 21st. It's really important to get as much accomplished as you can. Because when Mercury slows down around the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and then on the 20th, on the 21st, as Mercury begins turning backwards, it's going to be more difficult to push things ahead. And in fact, that's a great time to take a step back and think, what didn't I do that I should have done? How can I use this time to actually get things back in order so that on February 11th, when Mercury starts moving forward again, I can ride that energy like a wave forward, like a surfer who's waited for the right wave. I mean, part of surfing is being able to balance yourself on the board. The other part of surfing is knowing which wave to take. And so with Mercury turning retrograde, it's a time to not necessarily take new waves. It's a time to work with what you have and wait for that wave in February to come back through again. By the way, it's common when Mercury turns retrograde for weird things to happen, like the largest regional internet outages that have ever occurred have happened on the day, 3 of them over the past 20 years, on the day that Mercury turned retrograde. We often have and I'm not saying that a hard drive can go anytime. You can get messed up in travel problems anytime. But the stories do seem to increase when Mercury turns retrograde, especially if we're in a hurry. The classic astrology line is don't sign any contracts, don't make any major purchases or major moves when Mercury is retrograde. And that is just plain bullshit from my perspective. The scenario, though, is this. I think I need a car. I've been thinking about it for a while. I'm going to go out and look for a car, but I'm not going to buy one. I need to just start looking. You go out, and the first car you see is a 1955 Thunderbird that's been painted purple. And purple's your favorite color, and you go, I want that, and you take it. And it's not until 3 days later when you realize, shit, I don't even have room for my dog in there. And not only that, this is not a very useful car, and oh, by the way, it needs a mechanic to live with it, and so on. The problem is not signing the contract when Mercury turns retrograde. The problem is feeling this great sense of urgency. You see, Mercury, the communicator planet, when it's retrograde, is closer to Earth, so we're thinking harder and faster, and we got more stuff going on, and we go, oh my God, yes, now, go. And that's a mistake. It's really important while Mercury is retrograde to remember to take a few deep breaths, remember to step back, remember to take time, that there's not as much immediacy or urgency as it feels like in the moment. You with me? All right. Okay, let's move along. Got a couple of other events to catch this month. On January 14th, we have Mars making a 90-degree angle, Mars which has now moved into Pisces and heading toward that conjunction with Neptune. Mars makes a 90-degree angle with Saturn. Mars hot, Saturn cold. 90 degrees, stress, conflict. It's no fun when the excitement and the energy and the forward motion of spontaneous Mars meets Saturn that says no. And often we have issues in our life again. And so we're seeing this kind of theme of this excitement of the possibilities of the future turning into, wait a minute, we're not going to be able to run ahead quite as fast as we thought. Mars squaring Saturn is not a negative aspect unless we're trying to overpower the obstacles that we're facing instead of making our plan better, instead of going back to the drawing board and improving what we have. You see, quoting Jeff again, Saturn is the planet who says no but means yes. And what he means by that is that Saturn wants to make things that last. And so if we just run ahead and do something, we might get it done, but it might not be as good as if we're forced to take our time. And Mars is square to Saturn around, well, it's exact on the 14th. That is a time when we really need to look at how we can slow down to make things better. On the 20th, the Sun moves into Aquarius from Capricorn, but oddly enough, so does the Moon the same day. Can you see that? And in fact, just a few hours after the Sun moves into Capricorn, we'll do it this way, the Sun moves into Capricorn, and just a couple of hours later, the Moon moves into Capricorn, and we have a new moon that feels like it should happen at the end of Capricorn, but it doesn't occur until the very first degree of Aquarius. Again, there's that sense of the futuristic going on here. So the new moon in Aquarius, at the very first degree of Aquarius, is at 5:13 in the morning Pacific time, and this sets the tone for what's coming up for the next lunar cycle. So there's some excitement and there's newness, and we not only have the Sun and the Moon in Aquarius, but we have Mercury and Venus in Aquarius, and they are both opposite Jupiter in Leo, which is exuberance and overdoing. There's a sense now that we can take on too much, but we're definitely looking forward. And yet, oddly enough, it's that day, actually the next day, technically, that Mercury turns retrograde. And so we're in this kind of weird soup of futuristic, being pulled into what's next, seeing and visualizing with hope and good fortune, and with these oppositions to Jupiter, the planet of expansion and opportunity. All this is looking good, and meanwhile, we're kind of having to slow down. We're kind of having to rethink things. We're kind of having to head back to the drawing board. We do get support on the 22nd from the Sun's sextile to Saturn, and so that gives us the ability to stabilize energy. And so what we're doing here of value, whoops, let me get this, there we go. What we're doing of value here by the 22nd, we're really able to ground it out and to make things last. This is really important for doing things that matter. By the 27th, we begin to get the escaping of the next planet, Venus, from Aquarius into Pisces. And although it doesn't occur until early in February, Venus, as it moves into Pisces, immediately kind of comes under the rays of Neptune, the fascinator, the magician, the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? The champion of illusion or delusion. And Venus, the planet of love. We're looking here toward the end of January with Venus and Mars, the cosmic lovers. Venus, what you like and who you love, and Mars, how you're going to get it and how you're physical. These two planets are straddling, somehow that word didn't seem right there, but they are straddling, they are on either side of Neptune, and so there's this sense of romanticism, of illusion. This can be magical and wonderful, but it also can have a sense of fantasy rather than reality tied up in it. By the 30th, we have Venus reaching the point where Mars did earlier that we talked about, and that was Mars' square to Saturn. Now we have Venus on the 30th forming that square to Saturn. So whatever that dream was, the illusion, the fantasy, now is brought down to Earth, and we have to deal with the reality. But you see, even that's a dance, because Venus, over the next few days, is still moving closer and closer to Neptune. And again, it doesn't line up with Neptune exactly until February 1st, 2nd. And technically, that's next month, and we're not under contract allowed to talk about it yet. But this becomes a fascinating play, which again is part of the theme of this month, this dance between the potential of what's ahead, the hope, the future, and still being tied to the current and the past. Mercury turning retrograde, having to go back over old stuff, the sense of the dreams and the illusions and the fantasies coming in, and yet Saturn saying, yeah, well, make it real, make it real, make it real. And so I guess to kind of summarize, my closing thought here is that we're at the opening of, it's like we're standing at the edge of the sea, and we have an entire world in front of us yet to be created. We can't get rid of what's behind us, but we can do what we can to lighten our load, to loosen ourselves from the baggage of the things that we don't need to take into the future. That's part of what theoretically has already happened, but is still happening now. And yet, as we look ahead, rather than just racing off into the deep water where we might drown, instead, it's making plans and thinking about how we can move forward in a way that matters, both individually and socially, culturally, because astrologically there is no difference. These planets that impact the cosmic weather impact all of us, whether we're a nation state or whether we're eating lunch. It doesn't matter what we're doing, we're part of these rhythms. And so I think here, with kind of ending the thought on this Mercury retrograde coming up, is like we really need to attend to the things that we've left the loose ends that are still untied. It's better to tie them now than be forced to deal with them as Mercury turns retrograde later in the month. And when Mercury does turn retrograde, that's a time to take a little bit of a step back. On some levels, we're still pushing ahead. You remember, anyone who's spent any time at the seashore knows that you can be standing in the water and the tide's coming up, but the rip tide or the back tow, the undertow, is just pulling at you out to sea. There's not just one rhythm ever. There's currents within currents within currents. So I think we need to do what we need to do in order to separate ourselves from the holidays, from whatever that was, the deep, the dark, the transformation, understanding that come February, March, April, we're going to have another run of this Uranus-Pluto square. These issues are not done deals. The issues are not over. However, it's how we use the time now while we're not in the middle of a storm that will determine how well we can navigate in March, April, February, March, April, when the storm winds pick up once again. Welcome to 2015. Thank you all.